And now, for the week of February 27th, Adobe Photoshop TV is on the air.
Welcome to Adobe Photoshop TV from the National Association of Photoshop Professionals. And here's your hosts, the Photoshop guys, Scott Kelby, Dave Cross, and Matt Plaskowski.
Welcome to another epic episode of Photoshop TV, brought to you by the National Association of Photoshop Professionals, the fine people who bring you Photoshop User Magazine. This week's episode is sponsored by CDW. Make sure you check out them for all of your computer buying needs at cdw.com.
And Wacom, makers of the first widescreen tablet. Check it out at wacom.com.
Also visit EpsonPrintAcademy.com for the latest Epson Print Academy.
And our sponsor, iStockPhoto.com, the largest, fastest growing collection of royalty-free stock photography in the world. I could almost not get that out. Well, hey, everybody, welcome to another episode. I know things look different. It's because we're actually coming to you live from Hollywood. We're at the CBS studios, and we're out here for, we're taping some video for Photoshop World. We always start Photoshop World with a big, flashy kind of movie. And this time we're out in Hollywood shooting it here at the CBS studios. We're in Studio 3, as a matter of fact. Joining me today in the studio, as always, representing the great country of Canada, Mr. Dave Cross.
Good day, everybody.
And once again, rocking the house key, it's Matt Klaskowski.
Welcome back.
Even though we're in a different place, the jokes are still
don't
just
change.
as lame. All right, well, welcome, everybody. We're really glad to hear. We've got a great show planned for you, even though we're not back home. We still have a contest and giveaways, even though we're off the set. But we got a lot of fun stuff, and I think we're starting with a tip from Dave this week.
Yes, sir. I'm actually, it's kind of a tip, but it's also just letting people know about something you might not be all that aware of, which is layer comps. A lot of people see the palette, but don't exactly know what they're for, so I'm going to try and shed some light
It's
on
an
the topic of layer
informative
comps.
tip.
An informative tip.
I certainly hope so. Let's
Excellent.
take a look, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right, now the place you find layer comps initially is up in the palette well if you don't see the palette, but this is what the palette actually looks like. Now I've already started this a little bit just so I wouldn't have to do too many, but the whole premise of layer comps is when you have something like I have here, a multi-layer document, and you want to try and look at different combinations. I have different colored backgrounds in here so I can turn things on and off and see which one I like. But instead of having to go through all that, instead I can just create layer comps. So for example, let's say that I like this one here that has this kind of gold background without the grid. I just click on this button right here to make a new layer comp, and I call it something terribly clever like gold without grid, or something that will help me figure. Well, I figured, better be just logical. And now, see what it's doing. It's asking me what do I want to remember. The visibility. I'm going to also remember the position of my layers and any appearance like layer styles, and I click OK. And basically that's the whole idea. You just keep doing that, is repositioning things, showing layers, hiding layers. So for example, let's say I want one now that looks the same, except what I want to do is put the author's name over here, and let's say, what else? Let's say I want to take the toolbox and move it down here. So now I'm not just changing the visibility of layers, I'm actually repositioning them. So we'll call it gold with moved stuff, because that's, we want to be very specific. Now you could put a comment in here if you want and say like toolbox is moved, and so on. So let's assume for the moment that I'm finished. For now, I would save this document like I normally would, just like you would any PSD file, but the layer comps get saved inside the document. So now if I want to look at these, I simply use these buttons right here, and as you'll see, it's flipping through and showing me the different looks. So instead of me having to go through and hide a bunch of layers and show layers and move things, simply by clicking on these buttons, I can go through them, or I can jump to a specific one simply by clicking. And if you see any that have these little triangle, that just means there's a comment that you can open up and see what's there. Now, that's pretty cool, I think, in itself. But where it gets even better, as I said, it's built into the Photoshop document, but after you're done now, you can still do things with these layer comps. For example, maybe you want to be able to show this to someone. So we could go into here under the Scripts menu, and you'll see there's a bunch of options. For example, I could turn my layer comps into separate files. I could turn my layer comps into a PDF slideshow. Or one of my favorites, turn the layer comps into a WPG. I mean, how great is that?
I use those all the time.
Because WPG stands for Web Photo Gallery, and that will actually turn this into a website.
Now, the industry lingo.
Oh, see, I thought it meant Winnipeg Party Group.
Well, in some countries it might mean that, but not in this one. Okay, so continuing along, let's just create a new folder very quickly so I know where the heck this is. And the only sort of catch to this is you have to know the name of the style of the web photo gallery. So I happen to know that I like to use one that's called horizontal-feedback. And then you hit the Run button, and now we'll just let this run. And basically what it's going to do is take each of our layer comps, temporarily turn them into a separate file, a whole bunch of JPEGs, make a little small one, and then a bigger one. And on top of that, not only that, it will write all the code for me. So I don't have to do anything. It will actually make the entire website.
That's insane.
And look at that. Let me just resize this so you can see. There is my website all ready to go. I can load this up to my server, send the URL to my client, and now they just have to click on these different thumbnails. And just like that, they can look and they can say, I want to approve this one. It's evident, and they send that off to me.
How are they able to read that?
How are they able to read what? That's Canadian.
Oh, it is
Anyone
Canadian.
can see that says approve this one. And that's it. You're all set. You've got your layer comps turned into a website just like that.
All right, Dave, well, you happen to know exactly which one of the styles you wanted for your what you knew it was called horizontal.
Right.
If you didn't know, where would somebody
Yeah,
find
what
those?
you'd have to do the first time is go to File, Automate, and actually look at the command called Web Photo Gallery, and you'd see all the styles, including little thumbnails, which will show you the one you want. You just have to make note of the actual name, like the full spelling, and just remember that the next time you go to use that script.
Excellent. Thanks, Dave. Great, great tip. All right, we're going to throw things over to Mr. Kloskowski, but beforehand, tell us about the contest this week. What's everyone going to win if you win Dave's Trivia Contest?
If you win Dave's Trivia Contest this week, our prizes are going to be, if you remember, a few weeks ago we gave away an Adobe Messenger bag.
Ooh,
Yeah.
like
Cool bag.
Very cool.
And so we're going to be giving away another one of those, and we're going to be giving away another ticket to Photoshop World in Miami.
It's coming up soon.
March 22nd.
Excellent, excellent. All right, Matt, what did you bring for us this week?
Okay, this week I've got a tutorial on using smart objects, and I'm not just going to show you what a smart object is, but I'll actually show you how you can use a smart object in a document, save that Photoshop file, close it, open it up again at a later date, and just replace that smart object, and it remembers everything for you, all the little transformations and warps that I'm going to do to it.
Excellent.
Sounds very smart.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. All right, so what we're going to do is go to the File menu, and in order to get an image as a smart object in Photoshop, you can do a couple things, but I always just place the image into it. So I've got a photo here on the desktop, and I'm going to just open that up and just place it into my document here. Eventually, just click the Place button. And see, it pastes it right in here to Photoshop. Now when I press the Enter key, you could see here, look in the Layers palette, and you can see that little icon at the bottom right of it. That means it's a smart. It means it's a smart object. Oh. It's an object of intelligence inside of the Layers palette. Well, what is a smart object? Well, there's a couple of things you've probably all seen where I can take this and I can free transform, and let's come in here and make the photo really, 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 really tiny. Okay. And then you'd think if I tried to resize this and make it large again,
it'd get all pixelated.
It'd get all pixelated and all that. Well, let's try it.
Look at that. That's pretty smart.
Now it looks good. So that's one of the advantages of smart objects. Another one is that you can warp them. And they always retain, you can always get back to the original image. So I can warp it all I want. And if I say I want to go back to the original, I can. So let's go ahead and I'm going to press Control-T. That gets me in a free transform mode. I'm going to just position the image. Kind of want to paste it. I want to get it onto this book page here. So I'm going to position it here. And then I'm going to do that shortcut Control or Command and the number 0 so I can see all of my transformation handles here. And then I'm just going to hold down the Shift key. Let's just resize this just a little bit to get it in here. Then if you want to get into warp mode, all you need to do is click on this little toggle button up here in the options bar, and that takes you into warp mode. And then I'm just going to start positioning each one of these corners or each one of these edges of the book onto the book page behind it. Now one of the tricks inside when working with smart objects and transforming and free transforming, and this is new in CS2, is you can adjust the opacity while in free transform and warp mode.
Oh, warping itself is new in CS2.
Yeah, warping,
right?
Exactly.
So if you're in Photoshop 7, you're going, why can't I warp?
You cannot warp in Photoshop 7. Only works in CS2, and another feature in there is you can adjust the opacity while you're warping or free transforming. So let's zoom in so we can see a little bit more here. And now what we'll do is just take the edge of this book and just start aligning it to, or take the edge of the photo, start aligning it to the book. And obviously you'll want to spend much more time doing it than I am here. I'm just trying to get a nice little selection, a little edge there, on the side, and then bring these two handles in. These work, by the way, this warping mode, it works a lot like the pen tool and paths work. So if you notice, these are almost kind of like little anchor points when you're using the pen tool. So we'll just get it into place there. That looks pretty good for now, so all I need to do now is just press the Enter key, and it puts the photo onto the page here, and we can bump the opacity back up to 100. Now, one thing you might want to do is change the blend mode maybe to multiply, and if you need to, you can drop the opacity down just a hair if you want to try to get in the shading of the book behind it. But here's the trick. Now, if I decide later I want to replace this with another image, you think I have to go through and rewarp the whole thing again.
I would think that.
You
Yes,
would think
absolutely.
it, but I don't. Here's a little trick with Smart Objects. Go to the Layer menu, go down to Smart Objects, and choose Replace Contents. Watch what happens. I'll choose another image here. See that? It replaced that one photo with another photo, but it's still a smart object, and I didn't have to go in and warp it to the page. Now, the benefit of warping a smart object is if I go back into free transform or warp mode, look at that. It still remembers all the warp settings for me. So if I want to, I can come in here and maybe just tweak it a little more and try to make it fit better with the book. Or I could just trash it all together and just choose none, and now I'm right back to my regular photo. Now, you saw that I placed a photo in as a smart object, but if you're an Illustrator user and you have Illustrator artwork, you can also place Illustrator files into Photoshop as a smart object, and Photoshop will remember that it's an Illustrator file, so you can always, it keeps a link right back into Illustrator, so you can edit the original artwork.
Very cool.
Very smart.
Very slick. Very smart, Matthew.
Thank
well
you,
done,
thank
sir. All righty. Hey, I brought a tip for you this week. My tip is actually, I have a tutorial later, but a tip now. And my tip is, we're driving here to the studio today. We've been shooting here for a couple of days. We're driving here today, and we see an ad for a local Los Angeles-based sports, like an AM sports show. And I look over to that and I go, hey, Matt, there's that gradient map trick. And he goes, what gradient map trick? So, well, he said it better than that. What gradient map? You know, that gradient thing trick. And I said, hey, that's what I'll do for one of my tips today. So here's the gradient map trick. All right, here's the image we're going to use. Now, you can start with a black and white image or a color image. It doesn't really much matter. This one's a black and white. And you can see it's kind of just a bland, boring image, kind of some overpasses here in honor of Los Angeles. And then we're going to go and we're going to choose a gradient map here, right down here at the bottom of the adjustment layer menu like I've got here. And it brings up this gradient mappy thing. Now, it comes with all these built-in, here I'll reset the gradients, you can see what they look like. These are the default gradients right here, all right? What you want to do is from the little pop-up menu, I'm going to move this higher so you can actually maybe see it. Here, from this pop-up menu right here, you're going to choose Color Harmonies 2. I mean, you can use Color Harmonies 1, you can use any of these. I just particularly happen to think the ones from Color Harmonies 2 are kind of cool. So we're going to load those, and it says, replace the current gradients with the gradients from Color Harmonies 2. Oh, yeah. All right, and he gives you all of these. And you just click on a color, and you can see what it does. It looks pretty bad at this point. You have the choice of reversing it too, and it looks pretty bad there. Well, that doesn't look so bad. Take a look. Let me just move it out of the way. But to really get the effect, you don't want it to just blow out the whole image. You want it to kind of blend in. So what you do is you change the mode from normal to color, like that. And look at that. See how it gives you kind of like highlights? The highlights are kind of yellow, and then the shadows are like a dark, dark green. It kind of gives you almost like a split toning effect. And you can try other ones too. If you go back here, bring up the gradient map, you can actually, let's just kind of move this off to the side so you can see the image a little better. When it's up, you can just click on one, see what it looks like, then use the arrow keys on your keyboard to check, to check out different ones. See? Ooh, I like that one right there. That one looks good right there. So you can see how you're getting all the different tones here, the different shades of yellow and green and that. So there's the little technique to turn a regular boring photo into a Coolio gradient-likey photo. So the next time you have one of those boring images, it's time to try the gradient map.
And you did it as an adjustment layer, so you can always adjust it and try things and mask it out.
I love that.
Kinds of stuff.
It should be called a smart adjustment layer, so it would be like Matt's tip. All right, Matt, tell us about the contest.
All right, Dave, what do you got for last week's contest?
Well, last week's contest is from Dave.
Thanks for telling us about that. Last week's contest question was, where do you find a button that we actually showed on the screen that said Save Composition As? And the answer was in Photo Merge.
Photo Merge.
Now,
known.
how do you get to Photo Merge?
Just look, and there it is.
You look and it just appears.
You magically think,
Hey, I'm
I
actually,
bet if I went to the file automate menu,
I'm actually doing a thing on
That's why
PhotoMerge
I
later.
said it.
So
We knew that.
wow, what a segue! It was awesome.
I thought it was pretty good.
All right.
All right,
Now,
so
normally we have the winner's name, but since we're not at our facility where we have that, we're just going to put it up on the screen probably.
there's no winner.
There is no winner at
There's
all.
an answer and no winner. And
Yeah,
we
so
keep
We
it
will have it
private.
somewhere or another. You'll
Go
be able to find the answer.
to photoshoptv.com, our blog site, and if you look at this week's episode, we'll post the winner in there, and you can find out if it is you indeed.
Excellent. Okay, it's time for a commercial break. Stick around. When we come back, we've got more tutorials and a special guest.
And this week's question for the contest. When we return. Stick around. We'll be back in just 1 minute.
I'm Katrina Eisman, and you're watching Photoshop TV.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Speaking of Photoshop World, of course, we'll be there teaching and doing Photoshop World live there. And another thing that you probably noticed that, well, where's Matt? Matt has been replaced by Mike because we weren't very pleased with his last tutorial. So we asked Matt to leave in shame. We just grabbed the first guy to be around here. No, actually, this is our buddy Mike Cubasi. Mike works out here in Hollywood on the CBS set where we're working on. He's a photographer and has a studio out here as well. And he's just a heck of a great guy.
Having a lot of fun.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So tell me a little bit about what you do out here.
Well, we shoot production stills and the photos for props. When someone pulls out that photo and say, "Hey, have you seen this person?" That's what I do. That picture has to be generated. So I take a lot of family photos.
Excellent, and you're a NAP member?
I am a NAP member and have been for about 5-6 years now.
You are a fine man, sir.
There we go.
All right, but of course, you know, when you stop by our show, eventually we're going to have to do a tip. So hang on tight because we're going to be coming back to Mike for a tip in a minute. But before we do that, Dave Cross has got his contest.
I do have a contest question that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. I have to do a little bit of work this time. I'm going to give you a hexadecimal color value, and you have to tell us the RGB equivalent of that. So you have to figure out how to do that.
That's nuts.
DBB 851. DBB,
DBB
851.
851.
And you just have to send your answer, go to the Photoshop TV website and look for that little button there. It'll tell you how to enter the contest with your question.
Excellent. All right. Now, Mike, we're putting you to work, buddy. You brought us a tip, eh?
I certainly hope so. When Scott was...
I hope I brought a tip because the pressure's on.
When Scott was doing his tip, he was talking about the color layer blend mode. And he knew what he was looking for, but if you're someone like myself who isn't real sure just what mode I want, if you push the shift and the plus key, it will change the different modes to the effect that you want. And if you push the shift minus key, it reverses it. It's a great thing.
Ah,
Great idea. So you
sweet,
just pause
sweet.
and do it by looking instead of
That's
worrying
right,
about
more
the
of a
name of
visual
it.
thing.
All right, excellent. Okay, well, we'd like to bring Matt back, but you actually did pretty good. I don't know. I think that's the last we're going to see of Mr. Klaskowski. Now, Cubasi rocks the space ski. No, I'm sorry. All right, Matt is coming back. I'm sorry, your last name wasn't cool enough. Hey, I brought a tip for you. And my tip actually comes off of the somebody wrote on the blog this week. Of course, we get thousands of questions, so we don't get to answer them all. We actually answer 1,000th of the questions that we get. But somebody was asking, hey, how do you do just a simple panorama? So we're going to do that. I'm going to show you a very, very simple way how to use Photoshop's automated tools to do a simple panorama. All right, I've got a folder of panos here, and it's a 4-shot pano. So you shoot on the left side, you shoot on the left, you shoot on the far right and the right. So we're going to open up all 4 of the shots. Now, I got to tell you, you can make your job in Photoshop so much easier if you do a little bit of work in the camera first. If what you do is just make sure that you overlap your photos, well, first, shoot on a tripod, but then, that's key, but then overlap your photos by 20%. So there's like 20% of the previous shot in the next shot it'll make a huge difference. And the reason why is this, is Photoshop will actually do a lot of the work for you if you do that. All right, here are the 4 images that we want to stitch together, okay? So you have 4 chunks, and these do overlap a little with each other. So get all 4 open at the same time. Go under the File menu, under Automate, and choose all the way at the bottom here, Photo Merge, okay? So, and it's going to bring up a giant dialog box. Well, this isn't the one. It's the one after this that's giant. Yes. All right. And there's a little checkbox in here called Attempt to Automatically Arrange Source Images. That's if you want Photoshop to do the work for you. Now, I have to tell you, I think this should be on by default because I wouldn't have chosen this if I didn't want Photoshop to do the work for me. I would just do it myself. But here we go. You click OK, and it tries to arrange as best as it can those 4 photos into a panorama. It takes just a moment. Actually, it takes about 45 minutes. No, it takes just a moment. And it opens up this giant dialog. This is the giant dialog box. And it gives you this little warning here that says, Photo Merge cannot automatically arrange all of the images into a single panorama. The remaining images must be manually dragged into the work area. So it left those 2 chunks over here, but look what a nice job it did on these 2. So let's click OK, and then if you give me just a moment, I'm going to shrink the dialog box down a little bit here so you can see. There we go. So it kind of fits in the view. All right, so we're missing a couple of pieces here. What you do is you just go drag it and bring it in here. And you just kind of, you're going to visually line it up a little bit, and it will kind of snap into place. Did you see how it snapped into place there? So you're having to do some of the work, but just a little. Photoshop will, or Photo Merge within Photoshop will actually go in here and try to blend the edges together. So now we've got one more piece over here. We're going to drag it, just bring it over here and let it snap into place like that. Now you see that little seam, you're thinking, oh man, we're going to have a big seam. Well, generally, we can probably just bring it over a little bit. Try again and see. Hey, we're getting a pretty nasty little seam there. Now, sometimes I found that you see the seam here in Photo Merge, but when you click OK, you realize it's just a preview thing, okay? So let's go on. Oh, by the way, if you want to try advanced blending, if you think that you see a, like, not this kind of seam, but like a dark blue seam or something like that, try the advanced blending. Click the checkbox, but then you have to hit preview, and it renders, and you can kind of see. It didn't fix anything in this case. So don't ever use advanced preview. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and render it and watch what happens. We'll click OK. It puts it all together. And I think you'll see that there's not really, there's not really that big seam. That's like kind of a preview thing. Now, what you normally have to do using Photo Merge is this. You usually have to recrop the photo. See how there's a little checkerboard going on? That's a little transparent area. So what you can do is grab the crop tool and just kind of recrop it in a little bit. Now, this one was very, very straight. If your image is the least bit, you know, off kilter, which is why you want to shoot it on a tripod, then look, pretty nice and smooth. I will tell you some of the things that you might run into with these panos. Number one is sometimes you will see a visible seam, usually kind of at an angle where they went together. If that happens, the trick that we normally use is we grab the rubber stamp tool, we set the opacity, let me zoom in so you can see it here, we set the opacity of the rubber stamp tool up here in the options bar to 50%, and then you just kind of go over the seam. Let's just say that there was a seam right here at this mountain. You would option click over here on PC, alt click, and then just kind of let the colors blend a little bit in there. Of course, you don't want to actually paint the tip of that mountain. Don't laugh, Dave.
Sorry.
Okay,
it was going so well.
It was, and then it just, you know.
You're trying to fake a blend.
Okay.
The problem wasn't even there.
Do not ever do this. Don't ever grab a golfer and put them like way up there. It's just wrong. But anyway, that's the idea. You should just blend that edge a little bit. So that's just a quick little look at Photo Merge to kind of get you started. In a future episode, we're going to go a little further. We're going to do a little more tweaking and things like that. But just to answer that quick question, how do you put a pano together? This is the tool that I would use. As long as you do that stuff in the camera, it'll make your job a lot easier.
Now, as you said, Scott, one of the keys is not just what the software does, but how you shoot the images themselves, right? When you're taking the
absolutely.
pano shots.
You know, when you're taking the pano, if you spend a little extra time, you know, you got to do it on a tripod, of course. You got to overlap 20%. There's other things you can do if you set your focus to manual instead of autofocus, turn off your auto exposure and things like that. Shoot vertical, absolutely, Matt's right. Just, you know, there's less distortion of shooting. There's a lot of things you can do, but if you take those little steps first, you know, that'll make a big difference on the way down. Okay. Photoshop World. At Photoshop World, I want to talk about something there because it's pretty cool. There's a thing that if you're coming to Photoshop World, you're going to want to go to. It's called the Art of Digital Photography. Now, we've got like 80 classes on Photoshop World, on Photoshop at Photoshop World. So there's like loads and ridiculous amounts of training. But we also have an inspiration side where you actually look at the art of Photoshop and the art of photography. This year we have some amazing artists doing this thing called the Art of Digital Photography. People like literally Jay Maisel, Joyce Tennyson, John Paul Campanegro, we've got Vincent Versace, we've got Jim DiVitale, just an incredible group of just gifted photographers, not saying, here's the dialog box, here's the thing to punch, to push in Photoshop, but just looking at the beauty and the art and the creativity, and it's just amazing. It's just fantastic. So if you're going to Photoshop World, put that in your book. Something to do at night, got to go see. It's an after-hours class, and it's like 2 hours, but it will change your life. It's just honestly, it's just one of the highlights of the conference.
I think inspirational is the word for it. It really is. Just
yeah,
seeing
it
how
really
these
is.
people think and what motivates
It
them.
really makes you want to shoot, but of course, then it's over at like 10 o'clock at night, and you're waiting for sun up, But it's just an incredible collection of people. So keep that in mind if you're going to Photoshop World. Hey, at the end of every show, we like to give you 3 different projects of things to do before the next week's show. So, Matt, what's your project for this week?
My project is go check out digitallandscape.org, and that's the website for the Digital Landscape Workshop Series. And that's where you got Moose Peterson, Joe McNally, Vincent Versace. They all put on photo workshops. Now, the next one's coming up right here in California in Crescent City. I think it's in March.
Right, it's right before Photoshop World, right?
Yeah, so go check it out again. It's at digitallandscape.org.
Yeah, it's incredible. You're out there actually. I've been on 2 of them myself, and they're just incredible. You're out there actually shooting with them. And by the way, Moose is one of the guys in the creative side, the creative art of digital photography at Photoshop World. Just it's an incredible workshop. If you're into photography and Photoshop, and you're digital, don't go with film because they will beat the living crap out of you if you show up with a film camera. No, but it's an incredible workshop.
Well, it's cool because you see them at Photoshop World, and there's obviously 2,000 people at Photoshop World. But if you want to get these guys to yourself,
there's like 30 of you, a great little group, and Joe McNally, he's just incredible. Great. So go check that out. Number 2 is I am doing a hands-on workshop this summer, and I want you to come out and hang out with me. I'm doing it my first time. I'm doing it out at the Santa Fe workshops out in New Mexico, and we're going to spend a week shooting and polluting. No, we're going to spend
not the polluting part.
Not the polluting part. We're going to spend a week. We're going to do shooting. It's a course for Photoshop and digital photography. So if you are at least an intermediate level, this isn't for somebody that I've never used Photoshop before. So you kind of have to have a feel of you don't have to be a really hot Photoshop person, but as long as you've kind of got a feel for how Photoshop works, we're going to be basically shooting photos and processing them and going through the exact step-by-step workflow for how the class works. Now, it's a very limited size. Again, I think it's like 30-something people. So I invite you to come and spend that week with me. It's in July this summer. Go to sfworkshops.com and check that out.
I got to say, I actually taught there a couple summers ago, and it's just an awesome facility. The lab is great, and the light out there for shooting is just amazing.
Oh, yeah, we're going to have a blast.
Walk outside the door, and it's just great. So
excellent. And what's your project?
My project is to go check out a really cool website if you're into Photoshop contests where you have challenges just for fun. It's pixeladdiction.com. There's also another side with galleries and tips and tricks, but their contest site is really cool. So with some pretty interesting challenges to test your Photoshop skills.
All right. Well, there's 3 projects for you to do until next week's show. Hey, we want to thank Mike Cubasi for being on the show and sharing one of his tips with us today.
Thanks, Mike.
And next week, of course, we'll be back in the regular studio doing things the regular way in a very regular manner. Absolutely. Hey, we want to thank our sponsors for Photoshop TV. Special thanks to our sponsors, iStockPhoto.com, the fastest royalty growing free thing in the thing. So go check them out at iStockPhoto.com.
Also, Wacom, as we mentioned, makers of the first widescreen tablet at Wacom.com.
Yeah, and hey, go to Wacom's site. They've got a bunch of tips on there, a bunch of Photoshop tips and tutorials, so check them out.
Also, the folks over at Epson and the Epson Print Academy at EpsonPrintAcademy.com.
They've got 2 tours on the road right now, and they're doing all-day training, so go check out and see if they're coming to a city near you. And also check out CDW. When you're getting ready to buy your next computer system, you're ready to spend a whole bunch of money, and you want to save money, call CDW. They've got great service. That's like their hallmark is their service. So, guys, thanks again for watching Photoshop TV. On behalf of myself, Scott Kelby, and our good friend, Mr. Dave Cross.
Good day again.
And the only man who rocks the house key, Matt Klaskowski.
See you next week.
See you guys next week, right here on Adobe Photoshop TV.
Thanks for watching Adobe Photoshop TV. See you next week.